Yeah.
those are kind of the things that we're after.
A lot of the stuff that he knows about Grandpa and great-grandpa actually is hearsay, because when they were sitting around the table in Hurricane, you know, they'd tell stories about the ranch out here and different things, you know what
I
I'm
was
saying?
2 years old when we sold the ranch. But
You were how old?
2 years old.
2 years old when you sold the ranch.
He was about the last baby born in St. Thomas, I think. Weren't you?
I hear everything I know is hearsay, but I make it up like I was used to be here, but I don't.
That's Dad's philosophy.
Yeah.
Prove on the story you shouldn't tell.
Yeah, if you can't. Yeah, it's not a story if you can't improve on it. But Dad has some stories about Grandpa and great-grandpa that, you know, about out here, and I know Dad and Grandpa used to come out here and go do a little prospecting a little bit. You know, Dad come out with him a few times.
I brought my Peace Corps out. We went prospecting. I've worked out here. Howard Hughes used to own all the land around here. He didn't have it. He had it leased with the government, but Howard Hughes gave it to the church, and then the church sold it to a guy. I come out and developed all the springs out in the desert. And I've spent a lot of time on the ranch. Keith and I were very good friends, and I come out and visit him in Maryland. They always stopped at the station every time they came to St. George. So I had a great love for the ranch. It's been something I've loved my whole life, ever since I was a kid. And so I've kind of kept up on things. I know Dad used to go peddling. I know they canned everything here at the ranch. I've cranked the old canner. When we in Hurricane, we brought the old canner that we had out here. When Dad would go peddling in Mesquite, he'd load the wagon with cedar posts so it wouldn't bounce so much. Then he'd load the fruit on top of the cedar posts so that he could get in town so they wouldn't bounce so bad. And he had a knack of, when he had a bushel of peaches, he'd always cover it with a quilt, and that quilt would hold the peaches from shaking. When we ever went peddling with him, we'd put the quilt over the old fuzzy peaches, and then when we get to where we was going, we'd take the fuzzy quilt and sleep in it and itch all night. But he had a way of hauling fruit so it wouldn't get bruised. And I remember times when he'd take, Grandpa always told him that there's a lot of widow ladies in Mesquite who didn't have money. And Dad said, don't ever charge those widow ladies that was poor. He says, you just give them what they need. So, but they hauled canned stuff. He had canned fruit when he'd go peddling into Mesquite and stuff. And so he always told me those stories. I don't know, I might have added a little to it, but I don't remember. But I kind of relived all of them. I don't know where to want to start, but that was the moonshine capital of the world right there.
Well, they didn't let us drink a lot.
They didn't let you drink a lot?
No, they didn't.
Well, you should have got hooked up with Brent's in-laws. That's what he run, was shine.
Brent's father-in-law was a moonshine runner. He was more or less captured down there. They had this beautiful daughter. And they was members of the church, but they try and capture the missionaries. There are more missionaries get sent home down there from the members invite the boys to have dinner about every 2 or 3 days, and that's what they fall in love. And
then the girls would go play tennis with missionaries
yeah.
on TV.
Yeah. Brent was basketball. Brent loved basketball.
Yeah. So,
He wasn't,
Not-
he played tennis.
yeah. Yeah, there.
Okay, sorry. Didn't mean to get off.
I don't know where you want to.
haven't really started. Well, you know where Crystal River is in Inverness?
Yeah. And that sounds better. I can hear everybody good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's building a cabin down in the 300.
Yeah, it's a log cabin like this. It has the most gorgeous view.
That where he's building down there is really pretty.
It
I think
is
last
pretty.
time Dad and I was out here, we drove down to 300 down there and
Yeah.
looked and
I was
stuff.
trying to think who he was that bought my cabin in Pine Valley. He was a Houston from Mesquite, and he was quite a drinker. He had a drive-in cafe in Mesquite. But anyway, he went in my cabin up to Pine Valley, and he called me on the phone. He says, "I want to buy your cabin." I says, "Well, why do?" He says, "I'm buying it." He says, I got the check made out. I heard you want.
Pine Valley, the one just past Colorado City.
No, it's going
up
straight north
in the mountains.
towards Enterprise.
When we were kids, we camped
Up there on
your property.
Probably.
And at the time that you just had the foundation of flooring down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I remember they were putting tents in and hit your water line
Yeah.
and dig down and
Yeah.
patch it. Anyway,
Yeah.
okay.
So
Anyway.
we just went and said, you
But-
want to buy it? Did you? You didn't have it for sale?
Well, I did. I think my wife, I was always telling people, "Oh, just go up and spend the night," you know. My wife, we'd go up and the sheets was all messed up. And
Yeah.
I had a washer and dryer in there, and he could have cleaned it up, but nobody, they just left it a mess.
Yeah.
And my wife says, "You got to sell this place." And so
It was just outside the door.
Yeah, it's hanging on the door.
they,
Why? They took it down.
I think I put a for sale sign or something up. And so he bought it. I thought he was drunk. When he sobered up, he wouldn't want it, but he did buy it. I had all antique, I'd been collecting antique furniture. I had a big table out in Insane Asylum in Evanston, Wyoming. I had some good antique furniture. And so he wrote me a check. 2 weeks later, somebody broke in and all the antique furniture. It was just lucky. I'd have lost it too. After, I don't know, but anyway, he was a Houston, and he really a nice. When he sobered up, he still wanted to. He was so drunk when he bought it.
Well,
I said,
he was a Houston from Mesquite and he's married.
He-
He's related to.
yeah, he's sure a nice man. I liked him, but I hate to give up my cabin, but my wife insisted, so
Yeah, I know about that.
yeah.
I know about people.
And I know.
I used to let people that I knew come up here and stay for free.
Yeah.
And let them stay on the cabin.
They don't.
Come up and
They don't clean up after themselves. I don't know
I
why.
don't know. When I asked you about it, you told me it was double for family, so.
Yeah. That's why.
Yeah.
Well,
Anyway, where all I know, I was 2 years old when I left here. When we sold the ranch, and
okay.
and so you have to realize everything. I worked to the side of my grandpa and my dad in the hurricane, and
You
we
might want to start that and just let him talk about it for a minute. So.
And he can edit out.
Yeah.
So all I know is what when I think about them coming up in the spring of the year, I think about them. When school got out in St. Thomas, they'd head towards the ranch. They loaded the chickens, and they had these chicken boxes that they hauled chickens in. I remember them. And they'd load the chickens in the boxes. They'd put the wiener pigs in the burlap. They'd you could put a wiener pig in a burlap sack, and it would hypnotize them. So if you're going to take a wiener pig somewhere, you always put it in a burlap sack and tie it. And so I can imagine them putting a couple of wiener pigs in a burlap sack, and they'd just ride very comfortable coming up. And they had, I imagine they had 4 or 5 milk cows. I know that probably some cows freshened, and they had little calves they was feeding along the way. So they drove from they got it when the spring broke up towards this way. Dad always talked about the grass and down at the pockets. I can't remember the name of the grass, but it was always the cows would just give milk on it was. I remembered it an hour ago, but I can't think of it now, the name of it. But it was so good, the cows would just give double amount of milk. And so I imagine them coming down to the pockets, unloading the separator, leaving Dad there to milk the cows, and they'd probably, the next morning I imagine them, this is the way they talked. They'd come up to the ranch, because the feed wasn't as good at the ranch because it matured quicker down there. So Dad would probably, I imagine him milking the cows down there for probably a week or 2 or a month. I don't know how long the grass was good. Then when the grass got good up here, they moved the cows further up. And I don't know, I wish they could have visited with Julia and Wilma, because I estimate them to be about 12 years old when they left the ranch. I don't know. So, I don't.
You know, it's interesting. My mother had, 10 kids and 13.
Yeah.
And she didn't remember much of anything.
She done? Right.
Well, she didn't remember much about anything. I learned early on, or I learned relatively young, not to ever ask my mother about my childhood, about what kind of child I was. Because she didn't know, she didn't remember. Because the last 6 of us were born in 7 years. And
It was a blur for.
it was all just, and she, Neil thinks she had a nervous breakdown after Gary was born. But the doctor told my dad that if she had another baby, it would kill her. She wouldn't survive it. Because she almost didn't survive Gary. And so that was back in 1960, and and you couldn't just go get a hysterectomy. You had to have 3 doctors.
Yeah.
Inspect you and sign off that you needed it.
Yeah.
And my mother wouldn't go. So my dad just went and found doctors that he knew and got them to sign off. Broke the law. And my mother just said she wouldn't do it. She wouldn't do it. She knew there were more children up in heaven. And my dad called Fenton. Fenton got on the phone with her and said, Julia, your job is to raise the 10 kids you have, not to die having 11.
Yeah.
And he said, I'll drive up there and I'll give you a blessing right now. I'll get in the car right now. And that was 400 miles. And back then, driving 400 miles, that was a 16-hour drive. So my mother, I learned because she felt so bad that she couldn't remember, anything about her childhood.
Well,
So I quit asking her because it made her feel sad.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I met your father. I'm getting off, but I would like to say it when you said that, because when Lynn come down to see us, all of us, he had a friend that had an old airplane, and it was
Oh yeah.
and it was an old. I owned an
I
old.
milked cows
Oh, did you?
Till
But
I was 18.
and your dad wasn't much for flying anyway, but he had to get down there to meet us all, and so he had this little two-seater airplane. The pilot was in the front and Lindsay was in the back. I figured it was an old Taylor craft because
Yeah.
I had an old Taylor craft, and the termites ate the book, and it sunk down through the floor one time when I was flying it, and I had to stand up and fly it and get it back on the ground. But anyway, Lynn got so sick. That is such a rough flight coming down, and he had to throw up, and so he let the window down and stuck his head out the window to throw up, and he lost his glasses. His glasses went flying through the air, and so he looked a sight when he got down to Hurricane. And
So was this before Mom and Dad got married?
No.
Was
Say-
it-
What did you say?
Was it before Mom and Dad
Oh,
got
no. This
It
was
was what?
well after it. You know, Mom used to come down before Dad.
She come down in the Model A, and brought all you kids in that Model A. I thought that was the greatest car. I took it. She let me take it to school. I was 16 about then. I had my driver's license. And Lindsay worked at the sugar place, and they made this funny looking candy, but it was delicious. We never seen candy, only at Christmas time. Julia would load all the kids, and Lindsay would load her up with this candy. They got the sugar factory, and I don't know how you fit in that Model A, but it was
Well,
something
and
else.
she comes sometimes on the train with
Uh-huh.
babies and
Yeah.
cloth diapers and
Yeah.
bottles and
Oh,
a
yeah.
zillion little children.
But it was so fun to see her come. Now she let me take that. I was a hit at school. I took that old car, but how it made it down here, I'll never know. And it made it back.
Well, you know, when we come down, we had that station wagon.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way you could fit 12 people, you had 4 or 5 on the front bench seat.
Yeah.
And then Dad had us head here, and you had your neighbor's feet. Nancy and Gary went between the
so
wheel
you
wells.
could suck on your neighbor's
So you
toe.
couldn't turn on your side, there wasn't enough
Yeah.
space. You had to lay flat on your back. And they drove at night, but you know, Mother, she was a hot foot. You'd be driving on, Dad would be taking a little nap, and he'd wake up and the, telephone poles would be whipping by me like,
Like a picket fence.
Yeah.
and they'd say, where are we? We're not supposed to be in here for another hour and a half, move over, I'm driving. And she was like, what?
I remember when she got her driver's license, she had that Model A, and he had her park, and she went and hit the curb and blew the front tire, and the highway patrolman was giving her the test, and he had to change the tire, but it was crazy. I mean, I loved that woman. She was.
So my dad bought a Mercury from the guy, not the guy that flew Dad down,
Uh-huh.
but his dad.
Uh-huh.
Because he had a son who was a hellion. And
Uh-huh.
he had a Mercury, and he broke the speedometer going 130. Because he had hopped that car up
Uh-huh.
and running from the police. And so his dad sold it. Just sold it out from underneath him. Sold my dad. And so Mother, so it didn't have a speedometer, so she couldn't tell that. So when Dad woke up and those telephone poles were back, said, "You sure put all the way to the floor?" She said, "No, I got a little bit left there." He said, Bryce Gilbert has lost his license and
Uh-huh.
going 130 miles an hour trying to outrun the police. And so he said, "Pull over, I'm driving." Because he said, "I couldn't have slept then."
Yeah, I sure.
When Mom and Dad went back to pick up Jed on his mission, they were going to Wyoming, and Judy, you'll probably remember this. Mom passed Dad was asleep, and then when Dad took over driving, all those semis that she passed him.
And she said, no one passed me when I was driving.
Yeah, she is a sweetheart.
My mother was an angel.
Oh, she was. When I left home when I graduated from high school. I said, I'm not milking another cow as long as I live. And so I got up. I found me a job out at 2nd Street in Ogden. Then I went to work at Hill Air Base. But it was $1.29 an hour or something. And I can make ends meet. I just couldn't. So about every weekend I'd drive up and spend the weekend with you guys. And she'd just feed me like you. I mean, I went home just full as I could be. She'd even send bottled fruit and stuff. I mean,
How fun.
she was something special. I loved that girl. She was, yeah. Anyway, back at the ranch.
Ask if you need a tissue.
Yeah, my eyes run all the time, even when I don't cry, but
You know, I remember when Wilma had cancer, she used to come up. She came up several times when she had cancer and stayed with my mother for a week or
yeah.
because, you know, the doctors in Richfield never checked. She died of uterine cancer.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't check because they thought she was a hypochondriac. And finally it got so bad that Rex took her up to Provo and the doctor looked at her and said, oh my.
She's in stage 4 when they found it.
I said, why wasn't this diagnosed a couple of years ago?
Yeah.
We could have done something.
Yeah.
You know, they could have done a hysterectomy.
Right.
Yeah.
But the doctor was just convinced that she was a hypochondriac. And, you know, it was so hard on Wilma.
Rex found everybody that had a cure for cancer would tell Rex, and he called me up and says, I found a cure in Mexico, Tijuana. I loaded Wilma into my airplane. We flew her down, and we went. We had to we rented a car. I landed the airplane in San Diego and rented a car.
Did they arrest you as a drug runner?
That was a big problem. We had all these bottles of stuff, and we went into Tijuana, and it was all a gimmick. They had people out there saying they'd been cured and all that, and so and we had to smuggle this stuff across the border. And oh my land, I bought every kind of Rex did. I didn't. Bought every kind of a thing that, like we was tourists, you know. He had hats, and we had beads, and we had all kinds of stuff. And when we got across that border, then I flew her about the last time I flew her, I think she weighed 80 pounds. She was just fizzled away to nothing. But
And she looked like she was pregnant. And that's the
yeah, right here.
All her stomach would
We'd
have
wrap-
swelled up.
We made a bed in my airplane, and Rex would fly behind me, and we laid her out, and she was, a lot of times we flew her, she just barely alive. Yeah, she was. I love that girl too. Yeah, so. But anyway, our family has been through a lot in the years, but there's one thing about us, we was close. As my sisters, I always tell the story about having even in Florida, I tell everybody, I said I had 8 sisters. And I said, when I got about 15 years old, I told my mom I ain't not wearing no more hand-me-downs. I said, I just hate those dresses. I want a pair of overalls. So I still. So anyway,
Now you can't tell that story to my daughter Whitney because she'd believe it.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Do you remember that time she believed, you know, that story you tell about Granddad?
Oh yeah,
Standing out there mowing the lawn that one last time.
that's my favorite story.
Water was up, so you could just see that.
Yeah,
Tell a story.
I didn't like the way Venice told it because she didn't tell it really
But
good
you
now.
tell the story.
It's your story.
But it was, the lake had come up, is raising about a foot a day. That and Mom and I was sitting on the porch, and we'd seen Dad's hat going back and forth out there. So I swam out and got it, and Dad was under the hat, and he says, "I told your mom I was going to mow this lawn, hell or high water," and that's the way it should have went. But Venice messed it all up. So,
I think it's especially interesting since you were 6 months old when you left.
yeah, really.
Well, and then my daughter said, now who was it who saw Grandpa's hat going back? And I said, what? Well, when we were down here one time, you know, one of your relatives told a story
Yeah.
about that. And I said, you mean John? I said, one thing you have to know about John is John's a liar.
Yeah,
Actually, my dad always said if you couldn't improve the story, there was no reason to tell it.
that's right. I love to tell stories. That was my favorite thing to do.
But she believed it. She
I
thought that
know.
was a true story. And the biggest thing that's funny to me about that is Grandpa Whitney never, ever had grass.
No, no. Even Grandpa Whitney had roses that growing in his. He had every color of rose you could. Grandma Whitney liked roses, and Grandpa would get up every morning at daylight and work in that. No, he never owned a lawn, neither, and it was his lawn was beautiful because it's all in roses, and it was beautiful.
Well, and then he had a garden.
Yeah, always had
Yeah,
a good.
his house in St. George, you know, I mean, we came from Cache Valley, and so this red dirt, I don't know why that fascinated me.
Yeah,
But, you know, he'd have these huge onions in his front yard there in St. George, you know, all these vegetables. and
Yeah,
that red dirt,
they done-
that just was so
yeah.
interesting to me.
Beverly Hawkins owns that now.
Oh, does
The
she?
house that they had there by the park.
Oh, yeah.
Beverly and Joe
it's
Burgess,
huge
they
now.
own
It,
Now, is that the old house?
yeah.
that old house.
Not the one that they built just when they came back.
Oh,
No, it's
that's the one in
St.
Herkin. This is the one in St.
Oh,
George.
St. George.
They
Yeah,
bought it from Grandma and Grandpa bought it from Arlen's parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Beverly's grandfather that owned
Yeah.
it. So,
All right. So eventually just Dorothy bought it back.
Uh-huh.
well, they all sold it there for a while because,
I think
Beverly's
Dad's-
grandfather had it, and then Grandpa Fenton bought it.
He sold it to
And
somebody else.
And he sold it to somebody else, and then Beverly and
It
Joe
come up
come
for
and bought it
sale,
from
and
somebody.
Beverly bought it back.
Oh, well.
And then they
Yeah.
tore everything down except for the front wall of that house. That's the original front wall in that house.
I love it. It's like a cottage. It just looks like a cottage. It's so dark in front.
So do they rent it or?
No, they come down and live in it.
It's their
I
vacation.
remember one story about that house. We went down there one year for Thanksgiving, and we were all sitting in the front room, and, you know, all the brother-in-laws, you know, Rouge,
Yeah.
all of them. Anyway, so Ken Spenbug sent Dana out to get a Diet Coke out of the camper. Well, she came back with a can of beer. And she was walking up that walkway with a can of beer, and those brother-in-laws said, Ken, I'm so proud of you for coming out. I'm right here in Grandpa Whitney's house drinking a can of beer. You know, I never thought we'd see the day. And Ken said, what? And he looked over, and you never saw anybody move faster. Can you imagine plopping over 10 doors in
Yeah.
Grandpa's house?
No, boy, that would be funny. Yeah.
But I keep thinking, I see Danny every couple of years when she comes to reunion. And I gotta tell that story on
Yeah.
her when we're all sitting around.
You'll have to get that one on her.
Yeah.
Because that's too good a story.
Yeah, that's
I mean, she was just she was just a young kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, you never saw any old man move so fast. Out that front door.
Oh,
But he
that was
probably
funny.
wasn't that old. It was just that we were pretty young. at that
Yeah.
time.
But yeah.
He's probably really old about
Yeah.
45.
Anyway.
Yeah, but that was, oh, you want to, oh, that's the power. Oh, okay, sorry.
But
Anyway, I was a teenager.
Yeah.
At that time. I think I'm about 10 years older than Dan.
Yeah.
And that was the funniest thing to me, because those brother-in-laws, they
Yeah, you got a big lot of money. Candle.
and
Yeah.
the whole weekend they hounded me about it. But not when Grandpa was around.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'll bet Uncle Dennis was the instigator of that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that guy, he
He could tease you
Oh,
right
man.
now.
Oh, yeah.
he never let loose either.
Yeah.
That boy, he would never let loose.
Yeah.
But can you imagine somebody walking into Grandpa Fann's house with a can of
Yeah. Oh, that's funny. Yeah, that was
Anyway,
good. I tormented when Ken, in them days when Venice and Ken courted, we had the couch in the old house in Hurricane that all the springs were out of it, and they wore those old loose pants back in them days, and when you'd sat in it, all the change in your pocket went into the couch. And Ken always had a few dollars, 50 cents, or he'd sit in that couch, and I'd wait up at night until Ken would go home, and I could get 50 or 60 cents out of that couch every time him and Venice sat in it. So everybody that courted in that house would sit in that couch, and I always hit that couch.
made good money on that couch.
That was a good money maker. I loved that couch. But I teased him. I used to put potatoes up his exhaust pipe, and I teased that poor man so bad that
Yeah, and one of them blew across the street and hit the...
I hit the house across the street with it. That was a good shot that day. Yeah, I tormented. It's a wonder he's still stuck around.
Yeah.
But
So
Well-
how much older is Venice than you?
she is 4
years. I think.
years.
She was 94 when she
94.
passed away. wasn't she?
Dad's
Dad's 90.
older than you.
Yes.
And then Venice.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then is Anna younger than you? Or is it?
She's younger.
4 years younger.
Anna
Lou Ray.
And then
And
Lou
then Ray,
Yeah.
and then
Lloyd.
Janice.
Lloyd was in there.
Lloyd, and then
Yeah.
Janice was 7 years. She was kind of a trailer.
Yeah.
She didn't go every 2 years like the rest of us. But
Yeah.
Janice was kind of, and so,
Now,
Yeah.
I remember a story, it's kind of moving on, but the story of you coming home from a date and waking up Lloyd and saying it's time to go milk the cows.
yeah,
I mean,
I used to, when I was courting these kids' mother, I'd get home it was up to Rockville, up near the park, and sometimes I'd go to sleep because I'd have to milk the cows at 4:30 every morning and 4:30 every night after school anyway. But Lloyd would always put the milkers together in the morning, and I'd just get home about 2 o'clock. And when I get home, I'd wake Lloyd up, and I said, "Time to put the milkers." I always woke him up. He was a sleepyhead kind of boy, and so he'd go in and put the milkers together at 2 o'clock in the morning. Then he'd get checking the clock. Then he'd come and grab me out of bed, I'd be back in bed asleep, and he'd round me out of the bed, and I tormented that kid. I need to apologize. I never got a chance to, but I tormented everybody, I guess. It was just so much fun.
The reason why I bring that up is because Jed did that to me.
Yeah, yeah. Lloyd was just always asleep. He just kind of didn't. When he went to bed to sleep, and it was just so fun to wake him up. And he didn't ever get awake till about a half hour after he went to work. But I got quite a kick out of him. But it was really mean. But I just had to have something to do. I remember one time I come in from Rockville and I said, "Man, it's pretty late. Dad's going to be really mad." And so I thought, well, I'm going to turn the lights off and just coast in. So I cut the lights and had the car shut off, and I was just driving in, and I seen kind of a shadow out there, so I pulled my lights back on. There was Dad right in front of the car. If I hadn't turned the lights on, I'd run over him. And man,
Yeah, my dad, he had a different technique. He didn't care. Whatever time he came home, he wasn't staying up. He went to bed.
Yeah.
But one time I didn't get home till about the time he was getting up.
Yeah.
5 o'clock. And most Saturdays, he'd let me have a little nap sometime
Yeah.
during the day. Not that day. From the time I walked in the door until
Bedtime.
my dad couldn't go anymore. He had me out working on the farm. And I didn't realize at the time, but a little while later, I realized that he was just saying, "Why don't you come home a little earlier, son?"
Dad was
He
always.
didn't have to say a word after that,
Yeah.
did he?
No. I didn't stay out all night anymore because I was so tired. And I'd sit down and rest. My dad would say, "Oh, yeah, we need to go over and do that." I mean, he didn't let me sit down. He didn't let me rest. He nothing.
The only thing Dad complained about was I knew just how far to drive the car on the gas that was in the tank, and I could just about. He says,
Bring it back in.
"I wish you'd just leave me enough to get back to the service station." I'll bet he run out more going after I drove the car. It was not enough gas to get to the service station. He spent most of his time walking to the service station because I didn't leave enough in there for him to get it back. So,
How come you made us pay for our gas?
well, yeah.
And he owned a gas station, and I still had to pay for my own gas.
There you go.
So let's talk about.
Wait just a sec. We're going to do a switch. Okay.
So I know you and Grandpa. He was getting to where he was retiring, and you'd come out here and go prospect.
Yeah.
I think you came out here as much as anybody, or more,
Yeah.
on those early years when Grandpa started coming back out here.
Yeah. He's kind of wanted to find gold.
Yeah.
He wanted to find, he just, and that kind of got in me. I kind of wanted to find it too.
He's
And,
still that way, by the way.
Yeah.
There isn't any McClenny, Florida.
Well, when we get out here, we're prospecting him. and
Yeah,
I,
but anyway, it's we spent some good times out here, and but of course, going back, Keith, I don't know whether his mom and dad got a divorce when they had the ranch,
They did.
and Keith come and lived with us. Keith and I slept together,
Oh, I didn't know that.
and
So when you were in Hurricane?
Hurricane, we was out in the fields when he was, I don't know where Lloyd, because Lloyd always slept with me, and I don't know how he. Anyway, Keith and I were very close, and Keith and Marilyn, when they got married, every time they'd come to St. George, they'd come and gas their car up at the station. We'd visit. I had love for this place. I love this ranch more than anything in this world. It was beautiful. But I know when Alan had it, he didn't care nothing about the trees or nothing. The cows ate it. It was just sorry repair. And Dad cried. We both.
I remember the last year Grandma came out, the wedding.
Uh-huh.
It just broke her heart because Keith was such a hoarder.
Yeah.
But most hoarders had a house and maybe a yard.
Yeah.
He had 200 acres.
Yeah.
And when I bought the place back,
Yeah.
it's been 5 years from now, over there where I have my cabin, there was nothing but garbage all the
Yeah.
way from that retaining wall all the way out to where that gate is.
Yeah.
And it took us 2-3 years to get all that
Yeah.
junk.
Yeah, it was sad. It was, but Alan, I remember Dad would come. Dad and I'd come out when Alan had the ranch, and
Was Flora out here then? Was Alan?
she stayed.
Alan
was-
was Flora's husband.
Yes, and she tended bar in Overton, and she lived in Overton most of the time. I never hardly seen Flora out here much, but I know I remember Flora used to come stay with us in Hurricane quite a bit when her and Alan was probably having a lot of trouble. But then Flora really got religious in the end. They attended the temple, and she's a pretty lady. She was a very pretty lady, and I loved her. She was.
Yeah, Cal May, I asked him about it. He says, yeah, they got divorced. He said mom, which was
Yeah.
Flora. He said, but never tell me why.
Yeah, I never knew either, and I knew I need Sherd and forgot her dad's stepsister, Sherd Ballard, and married one of the sisters. They was by the Cyphus guy.
Oh,
By the Cyphus guy, they had 4 children, had 2 girls. Alfred was in the First World War. I knew Alfred. He stayed with Grandpa all the time. Alfred Cyphus was in the First World War, and the Germans gassed him. And I remember Alfred when the first year they went to Hurricane, they bought turkeys and raised turkeys. And out on the Apple Valley, they raised Mila maize to feed the turkeys. And Alfred took care of that. And Alfred, I remember, I was just a kid, and Alfred had a big pot of coffee on. He had a little old house out there, and Alfred, he was drinking coffee, and I said, Dad, I want a cup of that coffee. It smelled so good. He said, oh, it'd make your nose black. You can't have any. So but I remember Alfred, he never married. And there's another brother.
oh, I thought it was Levi that never married, and that Alfred did marry. Am I got that?
It might have been reversed. Alfred, the one, there's 2 boys, Alfred and Levi.
Yeah.
I might have mixed up, but I can see it might Levi.
I wonder, do you have your Whitney book in your cabinet?
I'll have to look at my book again. But I know either Alfred or Levi lived a block from us in Hurricane, and they had a boy named, their oldest son was in the Second World War, and his name Lamar, and he looked like Smiling Jack in the old funny papers. He was an old aviator, but Lamar flew airplanes in the Second World War, and he married a girl that spoke 6 or 7 languages. She's an Egyptian girl, and she was the most beautiful girl. And then they had two twins named Thane and Twain, and that Scow, and they was older than me. I remember I was just a kid. Sherd Ballard married Clarice, I think. That was Dad's stepsister.
What is the Clarissa, maybe?
Clarissa, yeah.
Clarissa. We called her Clarice, but
Oh,
Aunt
Clarice.
Aunt
I
Clarice.
think it was. Clarice.
Aunt Clarice, but
Yeah.
and her and Sherd Ballard, that was Dad's other sister. And then there's
Now, are they the ones that were walking to or from
no
church?
the Murphy.
That was
The Murphy girl, I don't ever remember even seeing her. And she married the Murphy guy.
Yeah.
She was Dad's sister. But they was walking to church, and one of the girls got killed too. I think they was.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There's three of them walking to church in a drunk. Back in them days, there wasn't a sidewalk, so they was walking in the street. And the drunk run them over and killed them all. And Lawrence Murphy was their boy, and he lived with Grandpa. And Lawrence,
Grandpa Luke.
Grandpa Luke, and I remember Lawrence was me and him was buddies. He was a couple of years older than me, and he and I worked on the farm quite a bit together. I remember, I got to tell you one story about Lawrence. We had the team. We had the team that was out here on the ranch. It was the gray workhorses. Good team. They was a big horses, and one was, what would I tell you the name of them? I've never. Bill and.
Oh, what's the other one's name? Bill and.
Man, I told Tony the name.
By the way, I think we have the old wagon
That was, yeah.
down here on this truck. It's actually padlocked onto the truck.
Is it got the iron tired ones? Is it got iron?
No, the tires are gone, but everything else
Everything
is still
else.
there.
Was
They-
it Buck? Was it
And
Bill,
the
Bill
woods.
and Buck or something?
Huh?
Was it Buck?
Buck and Bill and
With
Buck.
the team.
And there was a team. But anyway, we'd mow the alfalfa. We'd go round and round with the old mower. And when the hay was laying on the ground, a rabbit couldn't run. You could outrun a rabbit. And so when you get to the last little go around, the rabbits would run out of the hay, and we'd have rabbit supper. And Lawrence and I was standing around waiting for the rabbits to come out. We'd follow the mower, and Lawrence got in too big a hurry. He seen the rustling in the alfalfa that wasn't mowed. He went and jumped on that thing that was going through and it was a skunk. And that thing peed all over him. And he was staying out at our place, and he stunk so bad. We washed him in tomato juice. We washed him in everything we could think of. And we still had to, he slept outside for about 2 or 3 weeks. But the stink of that guy, but boy, I'll tell you, he never jumped on one inside. We waited until he got out running. But we always had a rabbit dinner when we mowed hay. It
So
was
did
just
you just catch them with your hands?
they'd run, and you just jump on them, but they couldn't run across that new mowed hay. But a rabbit can outrun you hands down on the ground, but they can't run on the hay when it's flat out.
So John, if that team was here, how did they move that team to her?
They walked her.
It,
They took a wagon. They loaded the wagon. All Dad had was a 1928. When he got his money from the sale of the farm in St. Thomas, they bought a that was old. It was 1932, so it was a 1928 Chev pickup. And they loaded it, but they loaded the wagon. They took all this rock work they done out here. They had a sleigh that had built this sleigh, had runners, and that had one one horse pulled it. It was about 4 feet wide and about 8 feet long. And that sleigh, I picked up rocks in Hurricane with that same sleigh they had out here. They hauled the sleigh. They took, they had a homemade marker that they marked out the field with. It was a log going across this way with a tongue in it. You've probably seen them before. They had spades, 4 spades going down. I marked out with that marker. And Dad always told me, he says, man, your furrows are just crookeder than snake. And he told me he says, pick out a post at the bottom of the field and get it right between the 2 horses. And I'd sit on that, it had a seat on it, and I'd sit there and mark out the field with that marker. And he took that was come from the ranch. And also he had, I think the plow he bought in town, it was a 2-way. I remember them horses, it probably took all winter to plow a field with that. The soil was so heavy, we could go down, and by the time we got to the bottom of the field, them horses just could hardly catch their breath. And so you'd have to wait about 15 minutes till they quit panting. We'd go up the field, then we'd have another 15 minutes. We wouldn't plow 4 or 5 feet in a day. So it was a job to do a field.
Would they have walked those horses up over Utah Hill?
Say what?
Would they have walked them up over Utah Hill to Winter?
I don't know how they got there. I really
Well,
don't.
they would have.
That was the only road there was.
Yeah,
over
that-
Utah
That's the
Hill.
only way.
Yeah.
Unless they went the back way, but I don't know if there was a back way, you
But
know,
they,
because they,
the only,
Well, you couldn't go through.
no,
But then, I mean, maybe there was a road.
going this back way over to Trumbull, I'm sure
yeah,
there's,
but I don't know where I don't know how they went.
Well,
But I know that I always was a tromper, and they had these dump brakes, and then they'd go and roll this brake over and make a pile. And Dad would be on one side and Grandpa on the other, and I'd be the tromper. We'd load the hay, and we'd put some of the hay in Grandpa's barn and some of the hay in our barn. And every 10th load, we wouldn't just put, that would be our tithing load. We had to take it to the bishop. So they said, well, that's got too much foxtail in. We don't want to give that for tithing. So they'd go all over the field and get the best hay that they could find. We took it in for tithing. Every 10th load, they'd always make a mark on the wagon so they'd know when it's. But I knew it was hard work, but them two, my dad and my grandpa, never heard them say a bad word to each other.
Why don't you explain what a tromper is?
They'd throw the hay on the wagon, and I had to tromp it and make sure you get more hay on. And I'd have to.
fly off.
Because a lot of these youngins, they don't know what a tromper
Never tromped hay, but it's
I've tromped hay on a haystack, but I've never tromped it on a wagon before.
no.
Yeah.
But Grandpa, one time we'd taken a tithing hay in, and the team we'd been working all day, and then the team was about half asleep. We was going in through Hurricane. And me and Grandpa was on the load of hay. We had to pitch the hay off to the tithing hay, so Grandpa and I was going to go pitch it off. The hay we put in the barn, they had a system rigged up. They put a 3-sided rope on the wagon before we put they'd use the team to roll the hay into the barn. The rope would go over the top, and then they had two ropes that the hay would roll on. If you tromped the hay good, it would roll the whole load as a bunch. You'd go, and they could roll it clear to the back of the barn on those. The team, they had ropes and pulleys. I don't know who invented that system, but it was sure a good little deal the way they'd do it. And then it was I enjoyed working with my dad and my grandpa. They was great people.
Now, did one of the brothers, half brothers of Grandpa's half brothers, work with them? Because didn't one of them go, or was he just out in Apple Valley?
The one that raised Mila Mays out in Apple Valley, Alfred was just an old bachelor, or was it?
I think Levi was the one that did.
Levi.
Here.
I think
Yeah, Levi. Then it was Levi that. Levi just stayed with Grandpa till he died. 'Cause
And
he,
then when I was cleaning that out, and then we finally tore it down because there
Yeah.
was no way to save it.
Uh-huh.
But when we cleaned it all out, there were bottles of Old Crow.
yeah. he was a real drunk.
Well,
If you'd have been what he'd been through, I'd probably been drunk. Well, I wasn't
and
drunk.
I think, because Grandpa always said that he slept with them,
Uh-huh.
and he slept with them.
Uh-huh.
And they'd come home from a night out and they'd be drunk and they'd throw up on
Yeah.
them. And that's one side of the story. But the other side of the story is at least one of those boys fought in World War II on the front line.
Yeah.
No, I think it was World War I.
I mean World
One.
War One.
Yeah.
World
Yeah,
War.
and
That was
they
him.
called it shell shock. I mean,
He stayed with Grandpa.
Well, it's
That's all I remember him was sitting on the porch smoking Bull Durham when I was a teenager, and he died shortly after. But they stayed with Grandpa and Grandma his whole life.
I think he died before Grandma Julia died.
Oh yeah. He slept in their basement in Hurricane,
yeah.
and Grandma. It was long after.
Yeah, I think. I mean, a lot of those soldiers.
I got them too, but that guy went through hell. They'd lay in the foxholes at night, and they'd just fight in the day. And they'd get up and fight, and they'd lay down at night. Sometimes they even quit fighting on Christmas, but they just both sides didn't shoot each other on Christmas. But during the day it was bloody. It was bloody.
Yeah, the fact that he had any sanity at all,
Yeah.
I don't think I would if I had to fight.
No.
And the Allies, England and the U.S. They made the trenches as uncomfortable as possible because they didn't want the soldiers to get too comfortable.
Yeah.
Whereas the Germans actually built good places
Yeah.
to sleep.
Yeah.
But they didn't want, they were afraid if they made decent
Yeah.
dugouts for them to go
Yeah.
into to sleep, that they wouldn't fight. And so,
I don't think any of them soldiers thought they was going to go home. I don't think so.
yeah, there's going to be an investment.
Yeah. It was,
I remember Grandpa when we'd come out with a lot of us coming out here to the ranch and stuff. Grandpa used to tell us that he always slept in the barn, and he said, with sleeping in the barn, there's spiders crawling across you all night long. You know what I'm saying? And he says when I went on my mission and we had to go sleep in a barn, I guess he went to Canada if I remember right on his mission.
Yeah.
He says when we'd sleep out in the barn or something, there'd be cockroaches going across them and different things. He said it never bothered me, but he says it always bothered my companions. He says he couldn't believe that these guys couldn't sleep through all that, but when them cockroaches would go across him, he says it never bothered him. I remember, but when he was talking about them guys, sleeping in the barn out there, that was what I remember Grandpa telling us about that. So.
You know what? I think we should take a lunch break and then come back.
man, I'm just getting wound up.
I know. Well, so let me just go.
No, I.
guys are, we're on.
All right, so John, and Tony, we should have a lease in here if we have mine. But I want to know, we're out here at the ranch, and I know what it means to me and why it's. But why is the ranch? Well, I'm not going to say why is it a sacred place. What do you feel like when you come to the ranch?
Well, I think it's something that very unique. The water, especially, and I mean, Grandma, she turned into a new person when she come out here, and how hard they worked to make it what it was. I mean, it wasn't anything when they got it, and they built these walls, all the rocks, every rock that you see. That's hard work. It didn't come easy, and they relied on the Lord. He was the Lord's hand was in everything they done. They never done nothing before they prayed about it, talked to the Lord about it, and it was just a piece of heaven.
So why was Grandma? That was Julia Whitney.
Yes.
Luke's wife. Why was the ranch so much better on her?
Well, the altitude and the coolness. When she got up here, she could breathe good. She just had to, she just turned into a different person. She was just couldn't hardly move down there. When she got up here, she is full of life. She could work. It was just a marvel. It was like day and night for Grandma. She just turned into a different person.
The other thing I heard once was that the water down in St. Thomas was, well, first off, they dipped it out of the
Cistern.
irrigation ditch into the cistern, and the irrigation ditches went through corrals and all that. But the second thing, I think I heard, I think it was Fenton told me this, that the water from the Muddy River was so alkaline that you were thirstier after you drank it than before.
Oh, it was. I mean, it was killing people. I mean, they had this. After so many people died, they decided that the water was what was killing everybody, and they was all drinking out of the Muddy River, and so they started hauling it in on the train, and we'd go up and take a 5-gallon container, and you'd put a dime in. I think it was a dime, and you get 5 gallons of water, I think, for a dime. But they had to truck it in because people were dying like flies. And so when they found this place, and the water up here was so pure, even though the government says it's not as pure, but it was good water. But and
They say it's pretty pure every time we have it tested.
yeah, it's good. And so this was like, I mean, Grandma wouldn't have lived down St. Thomas. She got to see Hurricane. She's just a different person. Grandma, if anybody knew her, there was one sweet woman. You never went there, but you didn't get a piece of hardtack candy. She always had hardtack candy. She spoiled us kids rotten. She just beautiful, just a wonderful woman. But I'd never got to know her if it hadn't been for this place. But this was, God really found it for him. It was so, it was wonderful. In fact, I believe of all Dad's sisters and her stepsisters, this ranch is what brought religion to them in the end. They went out on the wild side, kind of like me, but they they found the Lord and got back, and every one of them died, a very strong Christian lady person. And this ranch is what brought them together. This ranch is to bring people together. People will find the Lord here if they come. There's a spirit, you can't find it anywhere. I don't know. What about it? It's always drawn me here. I found peace here. I love it.
I don't know how much.
Well, basically as a young kid, we used to come out here for Easter all the time. And we used to camp down at the Pockets, and Keith had let us come up here and go swimming in the pond and kind of do a few things up here, but it seemed like he didn't let us do a whole lot, but he let us do a few things. And I remember us being down at the Pockets all the time as kids, and it was like I was telling Judy, I mean, some of my uncles taught me different things down there. Uncle Dennis, he was quite a cut up. I mean, that kid never let up on you when you showed up. And, you know, and when I was down there, Uncle Ray, he showed up with his muzzle loader one time. He shot, and ever since then I've been hung up on muzzle loading or hunting and stuff. And so this area out here has been very important to me growing up, because at Easter time, this is where we come. And we were a family. We had family outings down here, and people, some of my cousins, I never would have got to know most of you if it wasn't for this ranch. And still to this day, Dad, when he comes out from Florida, if we come out, we'll bring the four-wheeler out, and Dad can sit out there by that pond, and you just see his kind of go back to his childhood because of this ranch. I know he wasn't raised out here, but his heart's here. And I know Grandpa used to take us around in the back of his truck. I remember we'd get in the back of his truck, and he'd take us down to the Indian ridings down there, and he'd take us over to what they called Devil's Throat now, but we called it the sinkhole, in the back of his truck.
Yeah, I went there the first year they put up the Devil's Throat sign. BLM put up. And Grandpa said, the devil doesn't have a throat out here. He was offended that they would
name it that.
Yeah.
But Grandpa, I think if I remember right, he told us that at that Devil's Throat, or the sinkhole, what we called it, Grandpa said he used to stop and water his team in that. He said there was water in it, and he'd swim in it and water his team there coming back in from Gold Butte. And I kind of look at that now and how deep it is, and I'm thinking, man, there was no bottom to that thing, you know. But I'm sure back then there was a bottom, because, you know, I think the weather patterns changed now to where, you know, the water isn't where it used to be and stuff. But you know.
And I don't know if it's when we compiled the Whitney book, but that's what he said. There was a lot more water here then than is now.
But I remember Grandpa telling us about, you know, he'd water his team there at what we call a sinkhole, and you know, he'd go on in, because he hauled freight from St. Thomas out to the mine, and then he'd haul ore back into St. Thomas, because there was a train. The train would bring stuff in, and he'd haul it, and that's what I remember Grandpa telling me. But you know, you kind of, as a young man, it's hard to remember every little thing that he told us. But yeah, Grandpa talks about the Indians that were around here and stuff when he was a young man, and it was quite an area out here.
There used to be springs all over this desert. When Howard Hughes bought all the grazing out in here, when he left it to the Mormon church, and then the Gubler boys in Santa Clara bought the ranch, and they hired me and my backhoe to come out the wild mules or the, what do you call them?
Donkeys, burros.
Burros. They had tromped them. They could hear that water running from these springs, and they'd tromp them down till they got a drink out of that pipe. But they'd tromp to all the springs. I can take you to probably 15 springs out in this desert where you wouldn't see water. And in the olden days, all this desert had springs all over. But there's this one where you turn to go, the road I think goes straight south. You go down to the pockets and go on out. And there's a big pond on your left before you turn to go up to the where the Gold Butte mine is. And I went in and redone that pond, and there's a spring there that fed that pond. I dug that all up, got the water flowing, and I run into a whole bunch of these grinder things, and a bunch of arrowheads and stuff in it. I must have uncovered a grave of some sort, and I found some bones, and I took them up, and I buried the bones up, and I buried all this Indian artifacts that I found. And I said, now I'm going to come back and maybe sneak those to town. I've been down there, I can't find them. But anyway, the water just run out in this desert years ago. You can't believe how much water is out in that flat.
Well, one of the reasons the Lake Powell and Lake Mead are going dry is because they did a 10-year study of the water, how much water went down the Colorado River.
Uh-huh.
And that was in the mid-teens to the mid-20s and 90s. And, you know, there was so much more water there that there's probably 2 million, I think they say it's now 2 million acre each of what they measured. And so it was allocated amongst the states. We had a treaty with Mexico to give them a certain amount. And the problem is, until, you know, none of the states started getting all their water until about 25 years ago. But now that all the states are claiming all their water, they're going to have to change it. And there's been a lawsuit been going on for 10 or 15 years. Because California said, well, we started taking all our water first, so it should come out from the other. And the other states say, no, everybody should have to reduce evenly. But that was so, there was a lot more water out here.
I think it rained a lot more. I think we got more tropical storms coming up out of Mexico and places like that we don't get anymore.
Right.
And so that was why we had out here, you know, they talk about, I know Grandpa talked about, you know, the grass out here is tall as the belly of a horse. I remember him saying that, you know, that when he was driving his team, that, you know, there's a lot of grass out in here. And so, you know, and he even said that when he was still alive, that the weather patterns must have changed quite a bit because we didn't get the storms up in here like we used to. So
what other things do you remember your father, Fenton, my grandfather? What do you remember about him on this ranch?
Well, I think about when he used to go to Mesquite and he cut cedar posts to make a little money. The cedar posts, you get the government bought all the cedar posts you could buy. My dad was like a giant when it comes to with an axe. I've gone out and cut cedar posts with a chainsaw, and I cut about 50 in a day. But I give out in about 5 hours. Dad could cut cedar posts from daylight till dark, and he'd come up with about 100 in a day. And them old chips would fly. He was like a giant. When he milked his hands, when he grabs hold of you, when they was young, he could just darn near squeeze your hand off, and he could milk cows so fast. And I remember when he was in Hurricane, he was a judge, and I'd have to milk the cows because you had court going that night. And I'd bring the milk in, they'd say, "Son, that's only half the milk you should have got." He says, "I filled that bucket clear full." And so after that, when I went by the tap coming home, I'd fill the bucket clear up where he used to fill it. I invented 2% milk. But he was a strong guy, and they'd go out in these mountains and cut cedar posts, and then they'd fill the wagon with posts, and then they'd put the fruit on top and go peddling, and then mesquite and around, and my mother talked about that. But I'll tell you, on that wagon was the Bible and the Book of Mormon. Everywhere they went, they never went without the scriptures, and they read them. When they, at night time before dark, I slept in that bedroll of Dad's that had 4 or 5 homemade quilts. It felt like you could hardly breathe. It was so heavy in there. But when they talked to the Lord, you knew He's nearby. And then when both Dad and Grandpa, they prayed a long time. Sometimes the mush would just turn to a cube because he'd pray so long that I said, "Dad, let's not dish the mush up before you pray. Let's wait till after you pray, because it would set up like a brick." And because he blessed every cow, every horse, every little tree here has been blessed. Everything on this, nothing was built without prayer. It's just being around them two was like living with the Savior himself. If there's anybody who's close to the Savior,
I remember reading Grandpa's Fenton's life story. He talked about how Luke read the book Added Upon. And I'd never heard of that book. But then I ended up somebody gave me a box of old books. And there was that book Added Upon. So then I read it. And it was kind of the original Mormon story, like
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
The other thing I remember is how Letty always said this was a pregnant woman's paradise. That women who were pregnant in the summer would come up here.
Yeah.
Because trying to live down in St. Thomas.
It was a killer down there, yeah.
Because St. Thomas was 700 or 800, maybe 1,000 feet
It was.
Below
the
this.
sea.
Yeah.
And that would be hot.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, this little place just kind of makes you cry to come here. It's just a piece of heaven. And you can feel, I don't know, I can't explain really how it makes you feel to come here. And what you've done here, you're just adding upon what they probably visualized. And I know that you're feeling the Spirit and feeling what needs to be done too. And I don't, even like when I teach in the church groups and they wanted to go camping, I always picked out here. I don't know why. We come out here, I take the kids prospecting. We found fool's gold over here and they thought they was wealthy. We panned for gold. I've been all over this desert around here. I've been walked in all these old mines down around. I've had a lot of experiences out here. When I was out here for 30 days working on these springs, I just slept out under I just feel good just laying up sleeping bag out and sleeping on the ground. The ground just feels so good. But this one day I was going down through the Joshua Forest just before you get to Gold Butte. There's a Joshua Forest there. And I was just driving, had my truck going where my backhoe was parked. All at once, this naked lady jumped out in front and went like this, not a stitch on. I says, what is going on here? And this lady, she says, I need a drink. I got to have water. And she'd been out here for three days in this heat. And she'd pulled off down at Riverside and stopped. And she says, I'm getting low on gas. And the guy says, go across the river and go down. He meant go down to Mesquite and get gas. Well, she turned off on this road, and it was late, and she got out here where she could see the lights of Overton and across the lake. And she just kept driving till she got clear down to the darn near the lake and run out of gas. And she had been walking from her pickup for 3 days, and she's got to that Joshua Forest, and she says, that's enemy. And for some reason, something told her just to take her clothes off. She thought that she's going to die. And anyway, when she seen me, and so then after she had a drink, and she was really embarrassed because she was naked, and she went in the trees and got clothes on. I had a 5-gallon can of gas with me, and I drove down, found her truck. She went on her way, but I've had a lot of experiences out here. I found there's just so many. This little desert can talk to you. And I think about Dad telling about the quail. The quail used to be thick out here, and even during the Depression, they had quail darn near every Sunday. He had these little quail traps. In fact, they used to, in the old Scout handbook, they had how to make that little trigger. You put lath around and brought it up to a pyramid, and then they had a little trap where you put wheat on top of that. And he could, on Saturday out here, he'd set those traps. Sometimes he'd catch 4 in a trap. They'd go in and peck that little thing, and the trap would fall down. He'd catch. And on Sunday dinner, they always told how good that quail tasted on Sunday. And this had just provided everything you needed. It was everything just done so good here. It didn't matter what you done. It was just.
But you're right. I see these rock walls, and my dad ran a slip scraper. And we have a slip scraper over here. And I'm taking, one of these, as I get some of these other products around here, and then I have a laser cutter, and I'm going to cut sheets, a blackout that shows what they are. But, they built this with a slip scraper, and then with that box you have.
Yeah.
And those box, somebody said the wood was 4 inches thick.
Yeah.
Yeah. In that box that they made.
To haul rocks with.
And you pull up kind of like a slip scraper,
Yeah.
and then you take a crowbar or something, roll the rock in there, and then you pull them over to the wall there.
Yeah.
And
Now you've got to be strong to put them. Some of them rocks, you look at them, they're not little.
No, they're not.
And it's this little place was built. I mean, look at how count the rocks, man. That they never. I don't think they let up a minute. They had to be doing something all the time.
Well, and Grandma used to sweep the dirt in front of the house. There was no concrete porch, it was a dirt porch.
Mm-hmm. She was very clean, Grandma was. She was a clean woman. Boy,
But they had up there, and I think it was on that terrace up behind that cabin, that they set up tents through the summer where the women could come up and stay, and they didn't charge them for the tents, but they charged them for the fruit and the milk,
Yeah.
butter, and that's one of the ways. I mean, there were a bunch of ways that they made money.
Yeah. Yeah, they was able to accomplish a lot here. But
Yeah, but I had never heard that because I know they bought this from a neighbor,
yeah,
not
not Alan, but he's,
not Alan or his father,
yeah,
but a cousin.
yeah.
Bert, Nay, I think this is.
And I've been wanting to go over to the Lincoln County Courthouse and look and see who first homesteaded this.
They used to the Mormons couldn't vote in Nevada. And this, one of Grandpa's brothers, I think,
I think it was, as you look up there, I think it was George Burton.
George Burton,
I think
Went-
so.
he
That
went up
the
and got-
case.
Case.
yeah, and got,
And that people helped pay his attorney fees to
uh-huh,
fight that.
right,
Yeah, because we worked on compiling this, a lot of this is in. my
yeah,
head.
uh-huh, yeah, that, but Panaca,
By the way, this book was not that hard to put together because George Burton had done all the work.
Well, Grandpa collected the stories. Grandpa
Yeah.
read.
Well, George and Luke and Fenton
uh-huh,
collected all these stories before
Uh-uh.
these old timers died.
yeah,
And that's why we have all these stories.
yeah, I know,
We went to try and do this for the Rollins family, and nobody ever bothered to collect the stories.
yeah.
At least nobody we found.
The story of Luke Cyphus, when he met over in England, when he joined the church, and that was a good story. When his wife wanted to marry this other guy, but he wouldn't join the church. His wife was a member of the church, and she wanted to marry this other guy, but he wouldn't join the church. So she married Luke, kind of after kind of second thought. He was second pick. And then they was pregnant when they got on the boat. And that was a beautiful story of how at one time when the crack come in the bottom of the boat and it's filling up with water, and the captain says we only got room for the women and children on lifeboats. Is that in the book? Is it sure?
No,
the story.
The story, yes it is.
And
I don't know this story.
and so he loaded the women and children, and Luke told the captain, he says, well, let's just drain that, and we can poke rags in the cracks, and we can stop that leak. And he didn't, and the captain says, no, we're going to just let it sink. But you men are just going to have to swim. And Grandpa talked to the other people. Grandpa Luke says, look, we can fix it. Let's get a bucket brigade. We'll get the water out of the boat. We're going to get down and poke rags in the crack where the lumber is separated. And so the captain put up a fit. And Grandpa Luke, the captain was going to turn him into the law when they got there, because he went against his will. And he did stop, the boat didn't sink. And they got on safely. And then they run out of water, and they run out of food. The wind didn't blow for 3 months. They sat dead in the water. Never had a bit of nothing to drink.
And her baby was born
They-
and died. And was
Yeah,
raised
they
because
she didn't have enough food to feed the baby. And so they just happened another boat, out in the middle of the ocean, another boat come by. And give them food and stuff, and then the wind started blowing. In them days, it took 3 months to go from England to Australia. It was 6 months on the water. They run out of food and water. another boat come by. The Lord took care of them, and they converted one man to the church on that boat ride.
Wow, I
And
don't
him
know
and-
a lot of this.
Him and that they started selling lumber in Australia. I don't know who told me the story. I thought it was in the book. But anyway,
I mean,
they-
that part's in the book, but not
About the-
some of those others.
And the two of them, they
One would-
did
they-
have sawmills.
yeah, one
So
guy
was
one guy in the
dead.
hole, and they made enough money to go to.
But if you could saw straight lumber, which is not an easy thing.
No.
Not with that tall of a saw. that
How
they
many
had.
boards could you saw in one day? But they made big bucks at it. Made money enough. Both him and the guy he converted was built organs. He built the tabernacle organ that was one guy converted on the
You know,
ship.
it's interesting because the guy, you know, so Julia, anyway, I can't remember how, but anyway, they lived out in Panaca.
Look at the quail,
Quail.
baby quail.
Yeah. They lived out in Panaca. They came up after the Mountain Meadows Massacre. And,
I think that was the side I said. I
uh,
think his wife was Christiana, I think.
and they came up and stayed in Panaca. And he also worked wood. And so then he had a daughter who was called the spinster. Nowadays you call him a spinster,
Yeah.
you get in trouble. But
Yeah.
she was a spinster and she lived out there. And when she died, Luke and Fenn went out to clean out the house.
I was there when they cleaned it out.
And they,
Oh,
were you? And they brought back, they threw a lot of stuff away, they brought a lot of stuff back. But this was at the time when people didn't want old stuff.
Yeah.
This was.
There's some good relics in that old house.
This was the 1950s.
But
People wanted, you know, the new, modern.
Yeah.
And so my mother, who never would want to throw anything away, loaded up in a cattle truck because Grandpa never had good luck with the calves he grew.
Yeah.
So he went up to Cache Valley. He'd go all over Cache Valley every week, buying calves. And one year he couldn't come up. So I asked my dad to do it. And so my dad called his friend who was an auctioneer and he said, I need to have 10 yearlings, milk cows. And he said, now I need to borrow your truck to drive down to Hurricane. So they drove down to Hurricane and all that stuff had come there. So they filled it all up. Then going up the state, they stopped at all the sisters. And when they got to Lewiston, whatever had been given to the sisters, we ended up going. And my dad, and that was called the Panaca Cupboard because it
Yeah.
came out of Panaca.
Yeah.
But my dad couldn't call it the Panaca Cupboard. It was the damn Panaca.
Damn.
Because it was made, it was hand built out of lumber.
Yeah.
And so I asked Mother if I could build some shelves up there. It was a proven shelf. If I could have the cabinet. And so I took it down, found a guy who restored that old Mormon lumber. And he found a chip of paint and painted it. And so in my office at home, I have the damp Panaca.
Damn. Yeah, that's it.
I have to kind of jump back here a little bit, but the reason Dad kind of looks at all these rocks for stacking them, his job a while back, he was stacking rocks in St. George, but he was using an excavator that had a thumb on it where he could get a rock and put it in certain places. So he he kind of knows what it takes to build these rock walls, because he used to do that as a living. He actually did it along the Virgin River there in Bloomington.
All those flood walls, and I've stacked all them rocks.
So he kind of knows what it takes to build a wall and get it to be like what these guys done, except he had an excavator to do it, and they had to do it by hand. So he kind of understands what they... So when you look at these walls out here, you understand that that was all done by hand. It wasn't done with an excavator like what he played with, but you know, it's amazing that they could keep their walls and do what they did out there. I've looked at their walls too, and there's a lot of work in those to do it by hand. I mean, if you've ever done it by hand, it would be a chore.
Yeah.
But
when those scrapers, you always learned. I've worked with those scrapers. We built the Lake Mead ditch in Hurricane, and you hold on to that bar and if it hits a rock, sometimes that arm will go up, flip your eye clear over the team, and you always had to. Dad always says, keep your arm back, or if it gets under your shoulder, it'll take you clear up over the team. And it's that thing. If you ever hit a rock with it, and it flips over, boy, you get hurt pretty bad. But anyway, it's.
And those were the high-end scrapers.
Yeah.
The other ones that were kind of them was the old-fashioned ones. The two, this other was the modern scraper. It hauled twice, 3 times as much dirt. But I've operated those, but it's the ranch. As we were talking, as the ranch, this is a spiritual place. It is. When you just drive down that hill, the minute you go through that little sign where you got out there, the whole world, your mindset changes. Every time I drive out of here and head up to the Whitney Pass, and look back, I always think this must be what Adam and Eve felt like when they were driven out of the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
Alone in dreary world.
Yeah. This is
because that pond, these massive trees, just.
I've seen the desert when it's in bloom, and it's beautiful. Today it wasn't beautiful. It was a lone and dreary world out there.
Yeah.
But it can, in the spring, be the most beautiful place you ever laid eyes on. But this is all what work can do. But Dad and Grandpa he walked everywhere he went. He always had the flour sack over his shoulder. If you ever see him walking in Hurricane, he always walked with a flour sack, and he always had something to give somebody. Some would tell him that somebody needed something. And in them days, you go back in that day and time, we'd raise wheat. Then when we harvested the wheat, there's a guy come by and you put it in bundles. And then you wouldn't have to pay him to do that. He'd take so many bundles of wheat. And then the guy would stack it, and then the guy come with a thrashing machine, and he'd take so much wheat for thrashing it. Then we'd take it to the flour mill, and the flour man would make flour out of it and give us flour, and he'd take so much of the wheat for flour. So flour didn't cost us nothing. He'd give us the bran back. We'd mix a little milk with the bran as a shell off the wheat, and then you would mix a little stuff with it, and the pig feed, and you feed the pigs with bran. Then the flour, Grandpa always took some, and Dad take some, and there's always people that didn't have nothing. He'd pay tithing on it. He'd take 10% of his flour, give to the bishop, and the bishop would hand that out. But living when there's no money, you could survive. It was just, and they just, everything was just bartered out, and you just Grandpa was, and then when he retired, Arlen bought Grandpa out, Dorothy's husband. So Dad and Arlen kind of farmed together for a while, but then Arlen wanted to kind of be on his own, so he got his own milk barn, and he took Grandpa's land.
It was just straight.
Yeah, they hooked together. But and Grandpa went to work up in Zion National Park and washed dishes in Zion, and people come from all over the world to work there. You teenagers, and he never had teeth or nothing, but he was the funniest man you ever. Every little girl in that park rallied around Grandpa. You should have seen him. If you'd have went up there, you'd have laughed your darn head off. He would tell them stories, and they'd just sit around like little children.
So was this after Julia had died, or was she
Yes,
still?
she had died. And
I never heard
and he worked up in Zion National Park, and they
Now is this Luke you're talking
Grandpa
about?
Luke, and he was the funniest man in the whole wide world. He
He was
just,
very personable. Wasn't
everybody. I've never seen a person didn't like Grandpa Luke. He was the most amazing man you'll ever see. We one time I think I was going to tell it when I was taking the tithing hay. The horses were asleep and just going along, and Grandpa, he always wanted to make funny noises, and he come up with something, and the horses woke up and started to run. We went through Hurricane we was going 100 miles an hour. Grandpa just laughing. I said, "Man, we're going to lose this hay." We run the only stop sign in Hurricane then, but when they run until they just got so tired they couldn't run no more, and finally they stopped. And Grandpa, he just up there just laying on his back, just laughing. He thought that was the funniest thing he'd ever done. I was afraid for my life. I thought, boy, I'm going to die here. But he was a crack-up. If you'd known Grandpa Luke, he would have been something to know.
You need to tell them a story about when Grandpa would go to church on Sunday.
Yeah, he used to. He was in the stake presidency in
And this
St.
is
Thomas.
Luke, right?
Uh-huh.
Grandpa Luke.
Now, he was in the state presidency down here, wasn't
He was here.
he?
and-
In Mesquite.
Yeah.
Well,
But the stake president had a car, so Grandpa out here, he'd put a hay in the manger. He'd ride the horse in to meet the stake president where his car was at. He'd get off the horse, take the bridle, and tie it on the saddle, and the horse would come clear back to the ranch. Grandpa Sunday night would walk all the way out here all night long. He'd walk. That guy was tough. He could walk. He could outwalk anybody. He could get a gait. He was something else.
Well, and I think we actually measured the distance once, and it was about 17 miles.
It'd take him all night.
He'd walk all night. And then when they first moved up here, there wasn't a road up here. They'd come up those gullies,
Yeah.
which would terrify you. But then they used a slip scraper to build that road that kind of curved around the mountain.
Uh-huh.
And then Keith bought a bulldozer and straightened that road
Yeah.
out. But you can still see that old
Part of the
slip
old
scraper
roads.
road
Uh-huh.
as you go up here.
Yeah.
And I thought, when I look at that, I thought, man, to do that with a slip scraper, because they were on a pretty steep
Yeah, they were.
hill, so they had to have that slip scraper, and they had to hold it
Oh yeah.
so that it cut straight,
But they,
so that they could get up here better.
Yeah.
but I think where Grandpa and Dad got their strength is lifting these rocks. They was strong, man. One day I didn't come home from school. I thought, well, I'll just play with the kids at school. Of course, back then we had chickens to feed, we had all kinds of chores. And I thought, man, I just wanted to play with my friends. He picked me up at school and he was kind of sore at me. And my feet didn't hit the ground for 4 or 5 blocks. He just picked me up and danced me all the way home. And then he just knelt down, and after he got home and he scolded me, I guess. and then he held me and cried because he had to get after me. But I never stayed home and played at school no more. But he was just such a wonderful man.
I remember the year that Grandpa died when we were out here. I knew the end was coming. And he was saying goodbye to every rock.
Yeah. It was the last time he came out here.
Was that when we celebrated his 60th 60th wedding
I don't
anniversary?
remember, but I know he came out here and he wanted to go around to all the old hot places.
Yeah.
He knew, I think he knew he was going to die.
Yeah.
Had a brand new 1983 Buick Regal.
Does this one turn on too over here?
So I said, well, Grandpa, you can ride with me. This car will be comfortable. So I took this brand new 1983 Buick Regal. We drove out to all the spot. But that was so special to me to have Grandpa tell me those stories. Just me. Well, maybe it was somebody else in the car. But it was.
He always had told about his experiences. I can sit and think about coming out here in the spring of the year, and I can just about shut my eyes and see it all. He's told it so many times, how they unloaded the separator down here, turned the cows out on that pretty lush grass, and milked them. Grandpa, I can visualize Grandpa and was it Levi or whichever one that come ahead, and they got things going out here, but I can just kind of visualize it all. Even though I was a child, a baby when I left, but my heart never left the ranch. It was always here.
Well, and I think Grandpa, he was 10 when they bought the ranch. So he was a really young teenager when he was down there by himself. I looked at my little 13-year-old grandson this summer. I thought, he's probably 13 down here by himself, camping by himself, cooking for himself, and milking those cows and taking care of them. Wow.
And then his mother would come down on Sundays, or sometimes he'd come up, but
they'd come down and get the cream.
Come
bring
down
it up,
and get the cream,
then
and she'd
make butter and
food.
stuff. But he all by himself. He was a loner, really, but he mingled well. Anytime they had something going on in the hurricane, he was always the auctioneer, auction cakes. I've seen him auction a cake off 15 times. He'd give it to somebody, and it's all right. He'd grab it back and say, that guy's done with it. He'd auction it again. And I've seen, for the building fund, I've seen him just take that guy's cake and auction it to somebody and give it to this guy. And they said, this guy don't want it. He wouldn't even ask him. He'd just grab it from him. And he'd auction the same cake off 15 times. I've seen him make it over $100 on one cake. And he was a crack up. When he loved to dance. When he danced with his daughters, we'd go to the dance and he'd dance with every one of them. He loved his family.
Well, and he was a bouncer at the dances.
Oh yeah, he'd go and kick the drunks out and kind of. He done everything. He was a judge. I used to go. I wish I could have found that book. It had all the dignitaries in Hurricane in there for stealing chickens, and the biggest thief in the book always got to be the next bishop. But it was amazing how he was so fair with people. And he always wrote all this stuff in that book, and I used to take it and read about all these people that were very influential people in town, but they'd been before Dad when they was younger. But
Talking about chicken stealers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
He tells me how to just
I
to kind of
remember
run your hand up and down
you
your
have
leg.
to check them because you don't want a stewing chicken.
yeah, well, I can tell you if they's laying or not. You come up and kind of feel. If you get 2 fingers back here, you know they're laying. If you only get 1 finger, you know they're not laying. And then you don't want to squawk, so you grab the 2 feet and the neck at the same time. You go like that, and a chicken won't let it squawk out. But we was always just stealing our own chickens. But
Wow.
yeah, it was kind
So
of fun. But
Grandpa, used to bring up that that pink trailer he had.
yeah,
And he'd always park it kind of right out here outside the rock house. And one day he was walking out of the trailer and he had a gallon milk jug full of water. And I said, "Grandpa, what you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm going to go sit this gallon of water over there on that rock right over there, leave it there for a few hours, and then I'll mix it 50-50 with that pond water that's cold, and it's just right for a hot bath."
yeah,
That
yeah.
was the Saturday night bath, huh?
Yeah. I thought that was funny. You'd sit out there and then 50-50 with cold water, just right for a hot bath.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I remember we used to have those. Sometimes we do testimony meetings, and then other times we'd do kind of family skits and other things. But Grandpa would always grab Grandma and sing to her, "Let me call you sweetheart."
I remember
I
that.
remember that.
And dance Grandma all around there.
Yeah.
And it's just, at the time you don't realize how special that was.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But,
Time flies. It goes by.
now I think of that and I think, he really loved Grandma.
He did.
Yeah.
I have to show you. This is one of my favorite pictures in the whole book. So I think this was the 60th wedding anniversary, and we were all camped up here. The little pink trailer, and we had kind of that pokey straight hair, and Grandma's trying to comb it down for it.
My sister's was always he had a rooster tail always right here. And my sisters, they put everything on that thing trying to get it to lay down. It never would. Every one of them worked at it. Every time they see him, that's what they do, to grab that rooster tail and try and let it lay down. But it never laid down ever. But that hair, it always stayed black, and it never had the gray hair the day he died. But none of it fell out. But he was an amazing man.
Well, I'm kind of like my mother, eh?
Yeah. Right.
Yours don't go gray either much.
Look at the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
in our family, you either have the Whitney genes or the Rollins genes.
Yeah.
And if you have the Whitney genes, then your hair stays dark and
Yeah.
it doesn't fall out. Now, you must have been adopted because I noticed you don't have the Whitney
I'm a
genes.
Tobler. All my mom's brothers had a ring back here where the hair didn't grow. And so I got my mom's hair.
You get your mother's father's gift. That's what you get.
You're-
Well, I got my mother's hair, but Ray and Jed and Neil, They all got Dad's hair.
Yeah.
Al,
Well,
yeah.
Chad, he calls his the reverse mohawk.
Yeah.
Well, Chet got a double whammy because the Toblers were all
Yeah.
bald-headed. Yeah. The grandma.
So what else? If you were gonna bring somebody out here to this country, to the ranch, or just this country in general, what would you tell them about what they should see or do, or?
Well, I think just coming here and seeing the deer, even the wildlife is tame. You sit here, you see the quail looking in the window, you see the deer out laying in the tree. They're not afraid of nothing. Even the wildlife is calm here. It's there's some about it that is not, the rest of the world isn't this way. There's something around, I don't know.
You know, sometimes I can't post it for Mark when they've been in a bind. And so I've talked to people that have stayed here.
Uh-huh.
And so many people mention there's like this, I don't even know how they describe it, like there's this special.
Calm. It's a calm.
You know, something, you know, spiritual. People
Yeah.
that aren't even necessarily spiritual. It's interesting how they bring that up.
Oh yeah, it's hard for me to think about. Keith and I were very good friends. Keith and Marilyn, they were my dearest friends. I loved them dearly. But the government pushed Keith about as far as he could stand to go. And I know they killed him because everything you go to do, the government is right on you. And it just, I mean, Keith
Yeah.
just about it, and it's hard for me to visualize even the Rangers coming here and tormenting him the way they did, because it's such a peaceful place. And I wonder if that isn't, I kind of put this, because it's really, everybody that ever come here was just overcome by love and everything about it. But I wonder, I've been through some tough times in my life. I know what Satan's all about. I know how he deals. I've been under his influence for 15 years. And I know Satan is going to be a fighter. Again, you got to fight him. And he'll fight you every step of the way. And I know that Keith and they made things tough for Keith. And I loved him and I loved Marilyn. But they had a fight on their hands.
You know, it's so interesting because the BLM people have been the kindest, easiest people to deal with for me.
Yeah.
You know, so that fireplace you're sitting in front of, petrified wood, came from up in Limekiln Canyon, which you're not supposed to do that.
It's what canyon? Is that the one
Lime
we come
Canyon,
up?
we come up with.
We come up.
Yeah.
But was that way before when they did this?
Yeah, oh yeah, it was, he shouldn't have done what he did. But anyway, so a couple of BLM people were driving by and pulled in, said, we've driven by here several times, nobody's ever been here. Do you mind if we look around the place? I said, no, I'll even give you a tour. So I brought them in here and I showed them that fireplace and they said, man, isn't that something? And they said, and that, isn't that petrified wood? And I said, it is. And every stick of that petrified wood came right off of this property. And I said, and Keith got everything. Because I've owned this place for 5 years. and I have never seen another piece of petrified
He got every
wood.
piece that was out laying out there.
He got it all.
Yeah.
And they said, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because over in Limekiln Canyon, they have a lot of petrified wood looks a lot like that. I said, really? And, but, you know, there was no reason to go into detail or...
They're probably glad you didn't tell them where it was.
And then we just went on. But I mean, we all knew what we were talking about.
Yeah.
There was no reason to.
Yeah.
You know, you want to know about people coming out here. Trudy's family comes down from Spokane in the wintertime. And I've brought them out here several times. And they love coming out here. There's roads for four-wheeling. We have four-wheelers side by side. And we've been all down through Grand Wash. We've been out to, about every place you can think of out here. And they always want to come to the ranch. They always want to come up here and see the ranch. And when I bring them, we always go over by the pond and have a little picnic and just we talk about stuff that, you know, what I did as a kid out here, and they just love it, you know. And we go down to, you know, Devil's Throat, whatever you want to call it, and there's a couple of Goblin Valley. There's a Goblin Valley or Little Finland. A lot of people call it.
Goblin Valley's over.
Well, we used to call it Goblin Valley, and it was that for a while before they started calling it Little Finland. And you know, there's just over there to Little Finland. There's Indian writings over there. There's, you know, and we've just been all over out here. Middle of winter, we'll go down Lake Mead, put our feet in the water, you know, just for something to do. I mean, and we always come up here to the ranch.
You know, I found some Indian writing on the back of that rock where the ice caves are.
Really?
Huh.
I'm sure the Indians lived around here.
And there's a lady that I've met, and I need to get back with her, but I've been so busy. Her dad spent 40 years. Both his parents died. He was an orphan, and none of the people in that town took him in. So this old Paiute guy took him in, and once you were taken in by a Paiute, you were part of
the reservation.
Yeah, and so every woman was your mother. So he spent 40 years going around looking at Indian writings down into Mexico and everywhere. And he believes that there is actually, you can actually read Indian writings, and he put together kind of a book on it. I never got it published, but it's interesting, you know. He talks about that if you'd be going along and see it, it would tell you where water was, and it would tell you other things. And so I talked to her about putting together something and publishing it.
Yeah.
Now, her dad published one book, and then the guy didn't ever pay him the royalties. I said, well, why don't we publish the book, you keep the books, and then I'll buy them from you. That way you'd be sure and get your royalties.
Yeah.
So she liked that, so I need to do that.
Yeah.
But wouldn't it be interesting, because Grandpa always could interpret those Indian writings, but every time he interpreted them, it was a little different.
Yeah. Well, sometimes they had a new message for him, but I like to tell people where I'm from. I get a big kick out of telling them about St. Thomas. St. Thomas, this is how I tell my story. I said I was born along the Muddy River. a little Indian lady washed me off in the river. There's no doctors when I was born. And I says, I lived in a little town. It was a mining town. There's a school. There was a church. There was 3 saloons. There was a post office and a hotel. I say, Highway 91 went through there. You had to go through this town to get from Los Angeles to Salt Lake City. And I says, my grandmother, her husband had the mail route, and he was gone on Saturday night. And the miners come in to St. Thomas on Saturday night and terrorized the town. So my grandpa, this was my step-grandpa, who was a Cephas, he built a tree, this is a true story, he built a tree house, and Grandma would take the children on Saturday night while Grandpa was gone, because the drunks was wanting to terrorize, that wasn't a woman safe in the whole town. And I says, she would pull all the kids and her to sleep in this old cottonwood tree. She'd pull the ladder up, and that's where she'd sleep. And I says, it was a very wild town, but there's some good Christian people in the town. But I says, it is wild. And I says, then they built the Hoover Dam. I says, the Hoover Dam made Lake Mead, it covered their house up. And I says, St. Thomas was all covered up. But I says, if there ever been a town in the whole world that needed to be baptized, it was this my town.
It was
I says, this is my story I tell. I said, and everybody loves to hear my story about, they said, tell me about St. Thomas. And everywhere I go, I tell that story.
So my mother, you know, after the lake started receding and St. Thomas was out there, my mother and I, you know, a bunch of people wanted to go over and go down there. And I'd been down St. Thomas. So we were sitting up there in that parking lot where they had that monument that explains St. Thomas. And my mother, you know, she didn't, for her to interrupt our conversation, you know, that's just not my mother. So we were sitting there, and it was a nice cool day, and we had the windows down, and some people drove in from California, and they were reading that, and they were talking about how terrible it was that the government had came in and taken these people's property. And all of a sudden I hear my mother saying, excuse me, and I'm going, what? My mother's interrupting somebody? So finally they turned around and she said, I don't think you know how tough life was in St. Thomas. There was no electricity. There was no...
It was hard.
And she said, and the government paid us very fairly. And we went from being just the poorest of the poorest.
We was regular citizens when we went.
Yeah. And so she said, I'm sorry we interrupted your conversation, but I thought you should know what this, you know.
Yeah.
And it kind of shut down their conversation. They didn't have a lot to talk about after that, so they sat there and looked out there for a few minutes, got in their car and drove off.
Well, Grandpa, when we were kids, though, we went into St. Thomas one time. We all went there. I remember because we were all on the steps of I think it was a library or...
No, it was the schoolhouse.
Was it the schoolhouse where the pillars and stuff were?
Right, yeah, and that was the school, it was the church, it was the social hall, it was everything.
But Grandpa talked about the guy that bought the first automobile in St. Thomas. And he said that the guy had this car, and he was going to take people for a ride, but the sand was so deep, it wouldn't go. So they hooked a team and horse to it and rode it all up and down Main Street, and all the kids got to ride in the car. He said that
Being
was
pulled by horses.
being pulled by the horses. So
Yeah, that
'cause
was,
that was the first car that they had in St. Thomas, but it wouldn't go because the sand was so
Yeah.
deep. So
when I flew in this time, the final approach come right over our farm. We went and our farm looks like it's ready to be planted down there. It's all uncovered with water,
Yeah.
and it's just a beautiful place. And but it's I'd like to someday go down and see if we can find the old cistern and the foundation and stuff. But it was
One of the things I've always wanted to go look at in St. Thomas was one of the industries, we'll call it that, in St. Thomas there was hard rock salt deposits, and they'd mine them for salt.
it was a pink salt. Dad had a pile of it in Hurricane. There used to be some out here too. They had it. It was so the cows could lick it. I don't know if you ever been to Redmond, Utah, up by Salina. Those
Yeah.
are big salt mines that's up there. It's prehistoric salt. There's a salt mine just below St. Thomas. I wondered. I wish we could find where that salt mine is. It's probably about uncovered now.
Oh, it's
No,
uncovered,
it's
I
way
guarantee you.
uncovered, yeah.
Because the lake is all the way past
Yeah.
where the Muddy and the Virgin
Because it
join.
wasn't far below St. Thomas where the salt mine was. That they could sell that salt for good money nowadays.
Yeah, and that's what, and a lot of the men worked there, and the
Yeah.
women would come up here. They'd get the 4th of July off, so they'd come up here. And Grandpa Luke, who, his motto was safety first, would set off a stick of dynamite on the morning of July 4th.
Yeah, that's safe.
that was real safe.
I done that in Hurricane and really made a hit.
Yeah.
We stole a case of dynamite from the canal company, and we kind of about got in trouble over it. Didn't go to jail, but
Well, see, that's why it's good to have your father be the justice.
yeah. Yeah, we was up blowing rocks on the Hurricane Hill, and one of the big rocks went right down they had the wooden flumes across the wash. A big old boulder about as big as that table went right through the waters out of the ditch for 2 weeks while they fixed it. But nobody knew who done it. They're still investigating that crime, but nobody seemed to fess up to it. But
Well, I wouldn't now. I mean, it's gone this long.
Yeah.
I think God just let
Yeah.
it go.
yeah, but I love St. Thomas. I love the ranch. I love my little town of it. We sold the property up by the railroad tracks that we thought was worthless, and the government thought it was going to be a commercial zone right there. They
Yeah.
made more money off that old vacant piece of land than they got out of the whole farm.
Yeah.
That was the thing that helped us a great amount. We was able to buy that beautiful home in Hurricane, the haunted house in town, and had a flush toilet, and it just we thought we'd died and gone to heaven.
Grandma said that when we had her. What year did we have a birthday party?
90th,
50th.
I think so. I think it was around 90th, I think.
She said that she still, every time she turned on the light,
She marveled.
she just because she was in her late 20s when they moved out, early 30s.
Mother was 10, so she was
Oh,
probably
so-
about 30.
Yeah.
And
I never got to use that toilet till, you got 8 sisters lined up. There's always yelling, and all I heard was beating on the door. Get out of there! I'm next. But I never really got to poop in that toilet for years. I knew that it was in there, but I never got to use it.
So, growing up, I milked cows.
Yeah.
And we left, we were milking for the neighbor. We'd come home half an hour till the school bus was going to come by. And the sisters had the bathroom.
Yeah.
And that happened for about 15 minutes. And then, you know, the two of us who had been milking cows had to bathe in the same water.
Yep.
And of course, the guy who got to go second, that wasn't quite as good because you had to stir the water
Yep.
to keep it from setting up. And then you could only just jump in there, slide through, come out the other side, dry off, throw your clothes on, and run for the school's bus stop.
Mama just keep adding water. By the time it was time for my bath, it was dark brown. That water, it wasn't clean. She just keep adding to it, but
I didn't understand why if we had to get up at 4:30 to milk the cows, the sisters couldn't get up at 7
to have a bath.
to get the bathroom, to be done with the bathroom.
What would we talk about now?
Oh
Anyway.
boy, them was the good old days. There was never better days than that.
Yeah.
I used to have the radios that played my rock stations in Salt Lake. And my sister Nancy, after she'd come out from her bath, she'd come in and take my radio so she could listen to it while her hair dried.
Yeah.
I thought, why are you taking my radio?
It used to be, you'd have to, your radio would quit. You'd have to, there's a place in town that sold radio tubes. You had to take all your tubes down and have him test them, and he'd tell you which one was bad. And I had, the only station I could get would be Clint, Texas. They had a 50,000 watt station down there. And they had the haunted, some programs that was real spooky, and but it was the radio was a very luxury thing in your house.
Yeah. You know, it's pretty amazing the difference between, you know, I mean, I remember when we used to have to convoy down the state because if you miss somebody, now you just call them on the cell phone and say, where are you?
Yeah.
Yep.
And some cell phones, you look at a little dot and you know where they're at. Where they're.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I disabled that feature
Oh, did you?
on mine. I don't want people.
Knowing where you're
exactly where
They
you're
don't
at.
want you know exactly where you're at.
Yeah, that seems a little intrusive.
Yeah.
And out here, you can't get a lot of cell phone coverage, so which
No,
is good.
no.
Yep.
Marilyn used to drive up on the hill and call me on their cell phone. We visited quite a bit. Well, she went through some tough times when her husband passed away, and her and I, she'd go up, drive up there, and we'd visit for sometimes hours.
Well, I have internet fast out here that's faster than the internet at your house. It's that Starlink, 100 megabit internet.
Wow. That's amazing.
So we do pretty well.
Yeah.
But we only let,
So,
because I don't want kids here playing their video games.
No.
that's not what this place is about.
It's
No.
not. But the reason, there's a couple reasons we have it. One is I have to have it for my business. But other times, you know, men could come out here if they could.
Yeah, people could come if they knew they could communicate
Yeah.
with the outside world, or even, yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Some people have to do it. It's part of their life.
yeah, you know, cell phones were supposed to make our life easier. In some ways they did. in other ways.
In a lot of ways, it didn't.
Complicated it.
I know, because now you're always on call.
Yeah.
Yep.
Ray calls it his electronic leash.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I want to compliment you on what you've done here. I want the world to know that I love you very much. I love your family. I just love all of you. And I thank you very much. From all of us, I want to thank you for what you've done here.
Yep.
That is, from the bottom of my heart, God bless you for it. It's just wonderful what you've done. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Dad said if he was a little younger, he would like to come out and be your camp host.
Yeah.
He says he could make up a few more stories for you.
Yeah.
You know, there is a homeschool group out of Las Vegas that's been out here the last 2 summers, and they told us as soon as we're taking reservations, they'll come out next summer. Because it's just these kids from Vegas, they don't, and I think, and I'm setting it up in kind of a permanent trust so that it will be,
Continue on with your legacy.
it's
Yep.
not, my kids aren't going to have the option to sell it unless it goes broke and then they could sell it. But I want this to be a place, I want not just our family, I want people from all over to come up and experience this place.
We just yesterday went up to Kolob and Zion Park, and these little tents and stuff, they're packed out with people from all over the world.
Yeah.
People want this kind of an experience. People long for this experience.
Well, in Zion's, you have to take a bus into
Yeah.
it. And
But even down around Virgin, there's little teepees and all kinds of little houses like you got, and people are just flocking to them. If the word gets out, this place it can sustain itself.
oh, I don't have any doubt, because we haven't really done a lot of advertising
No.
because we didn't have permits and so.
Yeah.
So we closed this summer to get
Up to code.
to focus on getting the permits
Yeah.
done, and we're pretty close, we think.
Well, we probably wore out the camera.
So
This has been great. We appreciate your help with this.
Oh, yeah.
This is wonderful.
I know. It's,
I'm gonna go ahead and, unless if there's
No.
anything,
I guess I've told all I got to say.
Everything you know.
everything I've made up and everything I know.
yeah, and what I didn't know I made up. Yeah. But I do think that people who come out here, most of them are very moved by the experience.